Hey everyone, and welcome back to Stand By Go, the theater podcast out of Asheville, North Carolina. And for this episode, we have a great treat. We have all the way from New York City, a Broadway stage manager who has stage managed The Color Purple, The Play That Goes Wrong, and Beetlejuice. Please welcome Matt DiCarlo.
Hey there.
Hey Matt, how is New York City right now?
Well, currently in New York, it is there's a crazy thunderstorm outside. It is a full downpour. Car alarms are going off because of the thunder. Other than that, though, New York is slowly opening up. It's been quiet. Yeah.
I bet it's a little bit surreal, it being as quiet as it's been over the last couple months.
Totally. It's, I think part of what's so attractive about being in New York and living in New York and working in New York is how the city beats, how the heart of the city, sort of ticks. And it's strange to be here when none of that exists, when there's no theater, no museums, no restaurants, no people. It's a weird time to be here.
Yeah, I'm sure. I live in a tourist city myself in Asheville, North Carolina.
Yeah.
And I don't head downtown very much, but I've heard that there are some times where it's almost as crazy as it normally is tourist wise. I think people are trying to get into the mountain areas, but I think it's been pretty surreal down here as well.
I'm sure. It seems like it's surreal everywhere.
Yeah. So I just want to go ahead and jump straight into it. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your history in theater?
Sure. Let's see. I grew up in New Jersey. I was born and raised there. Like a lot of young people, I started in theater by acting. As a kid, I did school plays. I participated in community theater. I went to theater summer camp. I did all of that while lots of kids were outside running around and having fun in the summer. I was like hauled up in my room listening to cast albums. I was like the quintessential nerdy theater kid. And it wasn't until I was in high school that I even ever thought about doing anything that wasn't on stage. And I sort of happened upon being the student director for our senior year's production of Damn Yankees in high school. And I loved that. I loved sort of being able to lead the charge. I didn't necessarily, want to be bossy and be in charge, but I loved rallying the masses and getting to make decisions and getting to see things from that perspective. And when I was applying to colleges, I looked at a lot of different things. I really didn't have any idea what a stage manager was. And back then, there weren't as many resources as there are today. It was harder to sort of learn things and network with people and get in touch with people. So I did some knocking on stage doors, and I read a lot of playbills and as many articles as I could find. And I learned what a production stage manager did. And I thought that was really interesting. It seemed like a hybrid of all the things that I loved about theater and a lot of the things that I was and wanted to be. And so I ended up going to Rutgers, to Mason Gross, which is the B.F.A theater program there. And I got my B.F.A in theater production and management. I focused on stage management and directing. And I graduated in 2007 after spending a semester abroad studying at Shakespeare's Globe in London. And I moved right to the city. I graduated in May, moved here in July, and it was amazing. I spent my first year in the city not working here. I was networking, I was volunteering for Broadway Cares and the Actors Fund and meeting people. And I was working a lot at Paper Mill Playhouse in New Jersey. And I directed some summer stock at Bucks County Playhouse in Pennsylvania. And I got my equity card a year after I graduated. I got my union card doing Little Shop of Horrors at Paper Mill. And I've been really fortunate. I've had some great opportunities in New York come my way. My first was Rock of Ages. I signed on to be the PA for the off-Broadway run in 2008. It was supposed to only be for 3 weeks. And I actually ended up turning down an equity contract to do that because I wanted experience working on a commercial musical. I wanted to work in New York. I thought that that would sort of be like my gateway in, and it paid off. I mean, I stayed with Rock of Ages for its off-Broadway run, even though I was only supposed to be there for 3 weeks. I ended up becoming the ASM when it made a transfer to Broadway the next year. Flash forward 2 years later, I became the PSM. I was the youngest production stage manager of a Broadway musical at that time. I took over at Rock of Ages on the week of my 25th birthday as the PSM. And, you know, things sort of happened from there. I stayed with Rock of Ages for a long time before deciding it was time to move on. And after that, I sort of have, I've done some really exciting projects. I've spent a lot of time in Midtown Manhattan, but I've also been able to work in San Francisco and San Diego and Millburn, New Jersey. And I've been able to visit lots of cities around the country because I've been involved in the recreation of shows for the road, and I've directed some tours. And so I've been able to go out and visit a lot. And now I'm here waiting. I was ready to start tech for Sing Street on Broadway right before this all started. And now I'm like a stay-at-home person, just like everybody else.
That is it. That is a great story and path from how you started to now. And where the two of us met was when you were the PSM for The Play That Goes Wrong in 2017. I was in New York for the Broadway Stage Manager Symposium, and I asked Matt Stern if there's any shadowing experiences, and he's like, I got the perfect person for you, and he got me in touch with you. And funny enough, during that weekend, you were in Asheville, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
You were in Asheville for like a wedding or something, and I was in New York.
Yep.
And it was really funny.
Yeah, my cousin was getting married there.
Yeah, at the Biltmore House. Was that where they were getting, or at?
I think they were.
Park.
It was all I remember. I can't remember the name of the venue now. I'll think of it as soon as we're done, of course. But yeah. We ended up like from the airport, it was a drive into like no cell service to where the wedding was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that shadowing experience was just really, really amazing. And unfortunately, I think that, you know, with the coronavirus, it may be a thing of the past, at least for a little while.
So too. Yeah, I think so too.
But I mean, I've had great experiences of shadowing, and you were like my first experience of shadowing. And each time it's great because I always seem to be going like when I'm like, yeah, stage management's what I want to do. But then like going to shadow is like, oh yes, this is exactly what I want to do. It like gives me that push into like, yeah, you can do it. What you're doing now is what, you know, they're doing just on a much larger scale.
Right. I mean, it's true. It's the same everywhere. The only difference at the end of the day is like the dollars that people spend making the theater, right? It's all the same stuff at every level.
Yeah. And so I was jotting some things down as you were talking. And you went to Rutgers for a B.F.A.
Yep. And
I know right now there's a big, I want to say argument, but a big debate within the stage management world of like, do you go for a BA or do you go for a B.F.A? I'm just curious about like what your opinion on that is.
Let's see. I think that that's probably a debate for everybody who's a theater maker or an artist everywhere. Should I get a B.F.A? Should I get a BA? Do I need to get an M.F.A? I mean, all these things. And as somebody, I have a B.F.A. I'm also an educator. I teach in the M.F.A program at Columbia, and I teach in the B.F.A program at SUNY Purchase. And I think it's all about self. I mean, the real fact is you don't actually need any of these degrees, right? There's a lot of people who find theater without getting that degree. Do I think a degree in theater is helpful and useful? 100%, 2000% yes. For me, all I ever wanted to do was theater. There was no question in my mind that that's what I wanted to do with my life, that this was my dream, that I was going to do whatever it took to get there. And there was nothing else I wanted to study. I mean, you know, as part of the B.F.A program at Rutgers, you take a certain amount of credits, just like everywhere, in gen ed classes. and I did them and I got stuff out of them, but the bulk of my time there was spent doing theater, and that's what I wanted to do. My advice would be that if there's any question in your mind about what you want your future to be, and you're not 2000% sure that you want to go for a career in theater, maybe look at getting a BA. Because coming out of college with the B.F.A, I was like ready to hit the ground running, but my 4 years of college were spent studying theater, preparing me for a career in the theater or a career in entertainment. And of course, those skills are marketable other places, right? I mean, especially as a stage manager or a designer or a director, we have skills that we can use in so many other fields, thank God, at times like this. But, you know, all I wanted to do was this. And so that's the benefit of getting a B.F.A, is that you are like laser focused in a conservatory program about one thing. You can get an incredible theater education with a B.A. There's nothing, I don't think there's anything inferior about getting a BA as opposed to a B.F.A, if that's helpful at all. I think it's just a different kind of experience. It's not as, you're not stuck in as much of like a pigeonhole as you are when you're getting a B.F.A.
And that, you know, that makes somebody whose goal is commercial stage management, stage managing in commercial theater in New York, but has a BA, does make me feel a lot better, because I went to a liberal arts school in Asheville where the program is BA, and I have this question just because I don't really know, and I work for the university I graduated from, and I work with the admissions office, and so I actually know like our drama department front and back when it comes to like classes, as well as like the general education classes. But when it comes to like the college classes in a B.F.A, and you said you were in the theater production and management program. Is that what you said?
Yes. Yeah.
How many classes did you take that were outside of the management? Like, did you still take like all the theater classes, like all the design classes and stuff?
We
Because I know
took,
that's what we had to
yes.
do.
Yeah. And I think I'll also say, I think, you know, as a stage manager or a director, and I could talk about this with actors too, but it's real. The best artists are the ones that are well-rounded. The best artists are the ones that understand what everybody does in the room. And so the time I spent in the scene shop and in costume construction and lighting design and directing and acting, I mean, it all comes into play for me all the time as a Broadway stage manager. I use things from like the foundation of those classes all the time. There's nothing that I studied that I didn't think was worth it. And yeah, we took, you know, all of the theater appreciation, theater history, theater, you know, all of those things we all took. And then, yes, we took classes in every discipline and spent time sort of studying it all. And I would have had it no other way. I tell every aspiring theater maker that I can that they should learn how to do everything.
Yeah, I agree with that. I lucked out in the fact that I acted in all of my high school plays, so I was on stage for those. But
Yeah, me too.
my local regional theater, I did all the tech for all of their musicals, so I really got to learn from professional stage managers and professional actors. And at that time, I didn't know that this is what I wanted to do. And so it was just kind of cool to be like, hey, that actor's been on Broadway, or hey, that actor's been on national tours. And I got to do pretty much every tech thing except for like being a dresser.
Right.
So all of that experience really helps me now,
Oh,
especially,
yeah.
yeah, especially since I currently work in a community theater when I stage manage, and so a lot of times it's like my tech, or sometimes there are people who have a lot of experience, and sometimes it's people who have none, and so it's good to kind of know that, you know, I once was there in 8th grade
Totally.
moving a bandstand.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to the show, The Play That Goes Wrong,
Sure.
only because I got to see it and I got to shadow it. So I got to see from the front and from offstage right. Now, that original cast, that was the cast that is with that company and that came over from England, right?
Yes, the original company that did it here was the company that created it, Mischief Theater, and they are the eight of them are the people who originated the show in London and did it on the West End. And when it was time for me to learn the show, I went over to London for a few weeks, spent some time with the show there before we brought it over here. And that company did it for the first 6 months. So I had the real luxury of learning the show from the people who made it. You know, I didn't get a traditional rehearsal process out of that show because we were just transferring it. So they had already done it for a long time. I was the person who was new. We rehearsed there for a few days. Then we went right into tech here on Broadway, and the show ended up running way longer than everybody thought. I mean, the British company was here for 6 months, and then we replaced that company with an American company, and then ended up replacing some of them. And there's been 2 national tours. There's an off-Broadway show. I've had the luxury of directing all the other American companies of the show, and I can't say enough good things about the Mischief company. I still keep in touch with them, and of course we talk all the time because of the show, but we have friendships outside of that. They're the most hardworking, dedicated people to what they do, and they are absolutely the best at the kind of theater that they make. If you haven't watched the Goes Wrong show on like Amazon Prime yet, it's the sitcom that they now have on BBC. It is so worth it. I feel like everything they do turns to gold, and they deserve all of it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I remember I saw their Peter Pan on like YouTube before I even knew that there was a play that goes wrong. Like I'd seen it
So
just
did
a couple
I.
months before.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is hilarious. And actually a few months ago, it was on the night of the Tonys. A friend of mine who usually has Tony parties did a Zoom Tony party. And then we watched that, the Peter Pan, and the entire time we were like casting each other. Like you're the, you know, like, and at one point, one of the people in there is a director. He's like, how can we do this? Let's, you know, I'm sure it's probably one of the most difficult things to do.
Yes.
I feel like.
Yeah. They're shows that they all are. I mean, you know, my experiences with the Play That Goes Wrong, and I know that show so well, but their style with all of those Goes Wrong shows is so unique in that it's really hard to do that kind of comedy and make it sustain itself, and to really play the truth of it and not play it for comedy so that the audience can laugh at it. It's there's a real art and a real finesse to doing that kind of work well, and an unbelievable precision to not only the performances but to the technical aspects of the show. I mean, it's all really got to work like clockwork to make the stuff that goes wrong believable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to second you talking about like their company and the cast. I remember when I went to see it, I went stage door, and every single one of them came out, and I have a picture with every single one of them. And then that night that I was shadowing you went over the PA, and you're like, shadowing us tonight is John O'Neill. And, you know, not all of them, but a few of them came by your office just to come say hi to me, which is something that they definitely didn't have to do. They could have been getting ready. And yeah, it was just, it was a lot of fun between them and you. I didn't feel like I was just an outsider visitor just happening to come watch from stage right. Like I felt like for that night, I was part of that company, which is
I love that.
really nice. Yeah. I don't know. So you then directed the off-Broadway and the tours. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yep.
How was that, that progression going from like stage managing the show to directing the show for a new cast?
It's really interesting. By the time I had done the Play That Goes Wrong, I had done the same thing for a version of Rock of Ages on tour, and I did it for the Color Purple tour before doing it for Play That Goes Wrong. So much of what you do as a PSM is really watch the show and maintain the show and keep the show as tight as it was on opening night, and note the show and train understudies and train replacements, and your brain is sort of constantly looking at the show in that way. Not every PSM has aspirations to direct. I'm somebody who does. And so being able to sort of start at square one and cast a show and reteach the show and recreate it is a really special experience. It's, you know, there's something interesting about it in that it's not like we reinvent the wheel every time. We are recreating the exact same show that happened on Broadway, maybe with some small changes here and there for space or whatever. But of course, with every company, new life gets breathed into the show, and it's a really, really amazing thing to be able to know a show so intimately that you can lead a company through the process. And that's what I enjoy so much about The Play That Goes Wrong. I've had the pleasure of working with some incredibly talented, kind, giving actors in that show all over the country. And every cast that I've worked on with the show brings something completely different to it. To the outside eye, I think the show looks and feels the same. And I just know that each of those companies has their own heartbeat, and the show feels different to me with all of them. And it's just been the greatest gift. The show is the gift that keeps on giving for me, and it is a joy to be part of its life.
Yeah, I can definitely see, especially it's a smaller cast, if I remember correctly. So you also just, I think, organically get closer together than you would with, you know, necessarily everybody in a cast of like 50 people or 40 people or something like that. So is it normal for PSM to direct like an off-Broadway or a national tour, or is that just because you have aspirations of directing, you let somebody, you know, in the hierarchy know, or they came to you?
It all depends. I mean, I think, you know, once upon a time, many years ago, it was a very normal thing for that to happen. And today it happens sometimes and not always. The PSM's job in the future life of a show always depends. Sometimes they become the associate director. Sometimes they are the production supervisor. Sometimes they just come in and help get the show remounted during tech. So there is no one way to do it. There are some stage managers who I really looked up to and aspired to be like when I was learning. And those stage managers had a similar path to mine, but it's certainly not everybody's path. And it's not a path that everybody wants. You know, I know a lot of stage managers who are like, oh my God, I do not want to direct anything. That is not what I want to do. And I know a lot of stage managers who do. And I know a lot of stage managers who become the production supervisors. I know stage managers who don't have anything to do with the future life of a show. I think every show and every team has their own way to do that. And that's all about who we are as individuals, right? Like it's just about what everybody happens to bring into the room, to the table, and how to best utilize those skills.
Yeah, I remember when I was in my stage management class for my undergrad, and my stage management professor said, yeah, it's a natural progression for stage managers to become directors. And at that point I hadn't stage managed anything. So I was like, I don't get it. But obviously the more I do it, the more I realized that, yeah, it is. And I remember I stage managed a show last year, and then that director was directing a kids show this year, and I became the assistant director for her just because I wanted to learn more under her. And yeah, it was a natural progression, especially since it was with the same director.
So similar. Yeah, the jobs are way more similar and have way more likenesses than I think people think. And like how Prince was a stage manager before he started directing, and look at him. You know, it's I think the trick is to not and this is true of anything in this business, is to not pigeonhole yourself into having to only do one thing. Like nobody needs to be put into a box. There are actors who stage manage, there are actors who direct, there are directors who design, there are choreographers who perform. You know, like there's no rule to you can only do this one thing. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
not to me anyway.
At my local theater, I act, stage manage, and I've assistant directed, and until, you know, COVID reared its ugly head, I was in talks of directing something within our teens program, our education program.
Amazing.
So yeah, it allows it really to not get stale, to not get, either bored or overwhelmed. Yeah, I was spending a ton of hours at the theater, but I was, assistant directing kids and then I would go to a main stage and stage manage that. And it just, and I think that it just helped me in every other aspect. Like I've said it
Totally.
a couple times on this podcast, is I try and act in a show at least once a year or once every other year,
Yeah,
or, just because every time I do a show, I'll do something. I'll go, oh, that's what I want from a stage manager. So let me start incorporating that
yes.
in my does that have the same effect with you when you direct sometimes, that when
Oh,
you're like, oh yeah, and then you start incorporating stuff within your stage management?
totally. I mean, the thing is, one job absolutely informs the other. I mean, when I'm the PSM, I know what it means to sit in the director's seat, and I really understand that job. And a lot of my relationships with the directors I work with have that in that relationship. Alex Timbers and Cheryl Kaller and John Doyle and Kristen Henge. These are all people who, like, collaborators who I can PSM for, and also have a great conversation about scene work with, and talk to about anything. And our relationship exists outside the room. And when I'm directing, I, of course, know what it is to be the PSM. And interesting for me is on some of the shows we're talking about, I know what it's like to stage manage them. So that's useful too. The jobs absolutely inform the other, and they make me respect the other job so much more. And it's actually easier to change hats than it may seem.
Yeah, and one of the things that I can kind of think of is every time I go into a show, especially with a new director, I always, I'll talk to them early on, but that fine line of, when am I just there to write things down and whatnot, and when do they want my artistic opinion? And
Yep.
I feel
I
like,
take those cues from them.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I don't ever like offer it up, but like, I think I feel like, is it a little bit easier, especially if you've worked with a director multiple times, or they know that you've been a director, just to kind of get be able to give your artistic idea, um,
Um,
if that kind of makes
I,
sense.
yeah, it's such a fine line, right? Because as a stage manager, I think it's important that we all understand that we work in the room. We have a place at the table. We're part of the creative team. We're there to be part of the process, but our voice is not one that always needs to be heard. Um, but sure, I think it's all about trust. It's all about reading a room, knowing how to sort of speak and when not to, letting the director or the choreographer find you available and open to conversation. And of course, yes, the more you work with people, the more that relationship cultivates, the easier it is to have a conversation. I have worked with, I don't know, Alex Timbers and I have worked together for years. And I'm at the place with Alex where I feel comfortable saying anything to him about anything involving the show or anything else. That's not always true when you're working with a director for the first time. I remember when I was working on this new musical, A Walk on the Moon, which was at ACT in San Francisco. It was my first time working with Cheryl Kaller, who is wonderful. And it took us, a week or so in the room together to really learn how we were going to interact and connect. And then by the time we finished that process, we're talking about every line in the show together all the time. And I really felt like our relationship and our collaboration grew so much in 6 weeks, but it was all about mutual respect and mutual trust. And I think that it's everybody's responsibility to bring that into the room. I think that the most important relationship, one of the most important relationships that you have as the stage manager is with the director, and vice versa. And good stage managers and good directors know that.
Yeah, I have had the privilege to work with some really great directors, and each of them multiple times, either as an actor or as a stage manager. Um, and it's just it makes that first rehearsal just so much easier to me, like
Oh yeah,
knowing like what I can do and what the director is expecting of me, um
totally,
and that they have complete trust on me, that if they need this, all they have to do is, they may not even have to say anything, they just turn around and they look at you and you're like, yep, you got it. I think
totally.
that's so important. So my biggest thing, my biggest question has always been about tech. So I work in a community theater, like I said, and our tech looks like we have one day of a 10-hour tech day, and then we have 4 days of dress rehearsal, and then we open. And so I've always wanted to, like, shadowing was a great thing, and I know that this probably would never happen, but I've always wanted to just be in a room during, like, in the corner during a tech time of a Broadway show. Can you, as much as you are allowed to, kind of give us a look into like what a tech might look like for a Broadway show?
Sure. Every tech schedule is different, right? Every show has different requirements. A show like the revival of The Color Purple um, has a very, very different tech process than a show like Beetlejuice, where The Color Purple, the set never moved. There was just actors moving chairs around, um, lots of lights and things to craft, but it was not like Beetlejuice, which is a big Broadway spectacle musical. And The Play That Goes Wrong is a different kind of show than Honeymoon in Vegas. And, um, Broadway tech is different than tech that you're experiencing there, in that we have, and there's never enough time, but we have the luxury of time, meaning that like I can use Beetlejuice as an example because I think it's like a good example of a big Broadway show. We teched for 3 weeks in DC and 3 weeks on Broadway. And those days, 7 of them are 10 out of 12-hour days, meaning you work from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. or 12 p.m. to 12 a.m. And the rest of the days are 8-hour days, 1 to 9. Usually what that means is the crew comes in the morning from 8 to noon and does some sort of work call, or we dry tech, which means we work on lighting and transitions and scenery without the actors. Then the actors come in for either the 10 hours or the 8 hours, and we rehearse with them. And it's, we can spend 6 hours on one song and then not quite be done with it and have to come back and do more detail work later. And the tech schedule is usually crafted very closely by the PSM with the production manager and the director, and each day we'll set goals for ourselves. So we know we have to sort of get to this scene or this song by dinner break. Then after dinner, we want to get this far, and tomorrow we want to do this. And I really communicate with all of the designers about that. And the PSM is really, really steering the ship during tech. I think I always say there's a lot of people in the theater during tech who know where we're going and know how to get there, but the one driving the car is the PSM. So it takes a lot of collaboration. It takes a lot of patience. Everybody runs tech their own way. My tech is run a lot like I'm talking to you right now. I don't really speak any differently on a God mic or on headset than I'm talking right now. I like to keep things light and easy. And I think that the calmer I am and the more relaxed the room is, the better the work is. And it's a long process. I think, we usually do 1 or 2 dress rehearsals before we have an audience. And then after that tech process, we enter previews. And during previews, we do the show at night, but then we come in during the day and rehearse and make changes. And that could go anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 weeks to however long your show has. Beetlejuice did like 3 weeks of tech and then 3.5 weeks of previews. So it was a long process and a lot of hours spent really looking at the show moment by moment. And that's true. The Play That Goes Wrong, we teched, I think, on Broadway for 6 or 7 days. And with a show like that, you're able to really look at every single moment for a long time. I mean, that's a show that had been done before, and we spent that much time sort of really crafting it and getting it right. And I love tech. I love previews the most. Previews are my favorite part. But tech is it's a beast everywhere you are. But that's what I will always say about Broadway tech is that even with all of that sort of luxury, there always is like more on the to-do list. There's always more things that we want to do. That doesn't quite change just because the time expands. It's like I said earlier, where it's the same stuff everywhere. It's just like the amount of time and money that you have, right?
Yeah, it's just I've always loved tech. I've always loved the entire process. But I'm sure it's like this a lot of places, but ours always gets the nickname of Hell Week. It's like, oh, Tech Week is Hell Week because it's just it's the first time that we spend like 8 straight days. Because we are a community theater, nobody's getting paid to do it. It's just people are doing it because they love it. And
Right. I should say that too. I forgot that part of it is that it's all relative. I mean,
yeah,
your tech process is sort of relative to the way you rehearse, where
yeah,
like think about we rehearse a Broadway show 6 days a week from 10 to 6 every day.
yeah,
So really our tech days just get longer or stay the same and go for a longer amount of time.
yeah,
Just like your tech week the days get longer.
yeah,
It's all relative. It's also our full-time jobs.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. And I've often said I can't wait till the time where all I have to worry about is theater. Because
Yes.
theater is, and that is my goal. Right now I work 40 hours a week at the university, and then I'll go into the theater, for anywhere from 4 to 6 hours, 4 times a week. And I love it. A lot of people are like, how are you like walking, or how are you awake? And I was like, because I love doing it. But I just
Totally.
I can't wait till it's the only thing I have to worry about. Of course, worrying about paying bills and stuff like that will always be there, but just
Sure.
I could wake up and go in and do it. And I had about 6 weeks where I had a glimpse of that when I worked at Busch Gardens, and that was a lot of fun. And it was like, yeah, professional stage management and theater is exactly what I want to do. And,
Totally.
yeah, and thank you for letting us glimpse a little bit into what a tech week is, and you just make it
Yeah.
more exciting for me to want to see one and be a part of one.
Of
um,
course.
and I just have to say this because he would be very mad if I didn't. I have a really good friend. He was the first episode of this podcast, who's a massive Beetlejuice fan. The musical.
Amazing.
He's a huge fan. And all he's ever talked about, and the other day when I told him you're going to be on the podcast, he's like, tell him I want to be on the national tour. I was like, I don't think Matt has anything to do with any future tours if there is one, but I'll mention it. So Dylan, I have mentioned it, and that's all I'm going to say. But yeah, he's a huge Beetlejuice fan.
There you go. There hopefully will be a Beetlejuice tour someday. Who knows anymore with all of the scheduling stuff that's going to happen because of COVID. But there are plans for a tour, and hopefully I will be part of it. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. And yeah, he's an amazing actor, great singer. So I know
Amazing.
he's talked about, he's like, whenever I hear of an audition, I'm going to go for it. So who knows, you may see
Yes.
him. And so since we've mentioned it a couple of times and you just mentioned it about COVID, let's just talk about it. What do you think theater will be like? And let's just go with the Broadway level of for theater in general, but also for stage managers in post-COVID times.
Um, I wish I knew. I think it's going to be a different world for a while. I think there's going to be a lot of rules and a lot of red tape, and I think there should be. And I think that it's going to take a lot to make everybody feel really safe. And I don't just mean the audience. I mean the actors. I mean the crew. I mean the stage managers. I mean the creative team. Everybody. And on Broadway, we have a lot to deal with and to reckon with. And one of the big things is space. Everybody's on top of each other all the time. The orchestra's on top of each other in the pit. The actors are on top of each other in the dressing rooms. We're all climbing over each other and things in the wings. The buildings are old, most of them. And I think it's really important that stage managers are not the people who are responsible for deciding who's healthy enough to do the show and who isn't. I think that stage managers are not going to be the arbiters of like what's sanitized and what isn't. I think that the unions are really interested in making sure that there are people around who are experts in that, who are able to advise us. I think stage managers have enough to do, and the job is big enough without having to be the COVID police. And so I think that there's a lot to be worked out in how this all happens. But I think that Broadway is going to feel, first of all, I can't wait for it to come back. I long for the sense of community that we all get being together in a room telling a story. And I think that that is just going to feel different for a while we all get our feet wet. I think that there are probably things that are going to change during this that will never change back. I think that there are probably ways that we operated in the past that are going to be forever ways that we operated in the past. And then I will have as like memories of, oh, remember when we did it that way? That there'll be like a pre-COVID and a post-COVID way of doing theater. And I'm anxiously awaiting being a part of seeing that happen.
I agree. A lot of times when I'll read something like Matt Stern put out a great thing a couple months ago about like what post-COVID stage management might look like, or what theaters will need to do. And everything I read, I then just automatically break it down to like, okay, how are we going to do that on the community theater level?
Oh, I know. Yeah. It all trickles down. I mean, it's going to be, there's Broadway, there's the national tours, there's the regional theaters, there's the opera, there's so much, there's educational theater, there's community theater there. It's all going to sort of work its way through.
And I was on a webinar the other day, and I think it was Ira Mont that was, that looked at us dead in the camera and said, "We will be back. Theater will be back."
Yeah, it's going to take time, but there's no way it won't come back. I mean, I'm certainly not one of the people who is defeatist about it. Theater is resilient. Theater people are resilient. The industry is going to probably take a while to recover, but it's going to be back. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that it's not going to come back strong someday.
I agree. And hopefully even stronger.
Yes.
Hopefully with more stories to tell and better ways to tell it. Yes. So what is your favorite part of being a stage manager?
It's sort of the stuff we've been talking about. It's the collaboration. I think, I've been really lucky. I've stage managed lots of cool projects. I've worked with great people. Those things are all, that's all amazing. And the job is never the same twice. It's never the same show to show, and it's never the same 2 days in a row. It's never the same on a 2-show day. I mean, I love that. I love the fact that on any given day, the job is like equal parts technical, artistic, organizational, managerial. Like there are so many facets to the job. And I love that it's sort of pushes me in all of those ways every day. And I think there's a real art in it. There's an art in diplomacy. There's an art in leading a company. And there's an art in maintaining a show. There's an art in calling a show. There's an art in running a show. And there's an art in communicating. And so much of what we do is about communicating and interacting with people. And that's my favorite part of it. It's that, we get to do all of those things every day, and that like at the hub of what we do is communication and collaboration.
Absolutely. And that leadership of the company, not just the cast and the crew, but of everybody. For anybody who's listening who may have never been a part of a show at all, at any level, can you just give an idea, even if it's just a ballpark, about how many people are involved with putting on a Broadway musical?
Oh my God, yes, sure. Let's see. I mean, Beetlejuice had a cast of over 25. It had a crew that was bigger than the cast. It had an orchestra of 18. It had 4 stage managers. It had 7 dressers. It had 3 hair people. I mean, it was just a massive group of people in the building every night. And, when push comes to shove, everybody looks at the PSM for the answer, and that's an amazing thing. It's a cool thing. There's a lot of pressure that comes with that, but Beetlejuice is probably, it's definitely not the biggest musical and it's not the smallest, but
Mhm.
that gives you a good idea. I mean, we're talking back there 80 people, you know, it's a lot of people. And then there's all the people that aren't there every night, right? There's the general managers, the producers, the press people, the marketing people, the designers, the director, the choreographer, their assistants, their associates. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So, um, you know, between the PSM and the music director and the company manager and the dance captain, we sort of come together to make sure that the show happens every night. And as the lead, I use the word lead the company in every, in every meaning that could possibly be. It's about leading through the show, leading through stress, leading by example, leading through mishaps, leading through good times, keeping everybody on the same page, making sure everybody's as happy as they can be coming to work, enforcing rules when you have to, making sure people know the rules, making sure people are where they're supposed to be, um, having fun, leading, like leading morale. It all comes into play as the part of the job.
Yeah. And it's just, I asked that question for both people who may not know how many people are involved with the show, and also because I know a lot of people who do listen to this are either actors or stuff, or crew. They kind of have an idea. It's just next time you sit and see a show, just think of the amount of people that it took to create that 2.5 to 3 hours worth of art, and
Hundreds of people.
yeah, and I think that's one of the things that always amazes me, even though I've been a stage manager for a couple of years, and I know everybody who has been involved, almost everybody who's been involved in that particular show. And just the fact that so many people's ideas and talents and love come together to create this one product is just, it's just an amazing thing. And I think that's probably why I love it so much.
Totally. Me too.
And so, which takes us right into the final question, which is the final question that I ask everybody. And that is, why theater?
Why theater? It's such a good question, especially right now while we don't have it. I mean, I love to tell stories. I love to be part of. I mean, people always say theater family, but I love to be part of something larger, and I love to know that each and every night, the experience that we have in a theater is totally singular. It's, you can do a show thousands and thousands of times and it really never is the same twice, because the chemistry between the performing company and the audience in that night at that moment is real and specific and irreplaceable. You can't recreate one performance 8 times a week or for weeks and weeks and weeks and months and years. And so why theater for me is because I love to be part of that group. I love to build new things. I love to tell stories. I love to be part of the company of people who gets to collaborate and tell the story. And I love to be part of something that's real and that sort of disappears. The reason I don't do TV and film is because I like the rush and the adrenaline of live performance. I think that there is something completely singular about the experience of doing live theater, and I've been that way since I was 6 years old. It's sort of, the bug bit me early, and I've never looked back, and I've never questioned it.
That was beautifully put. It is my favorite question I ask everybody, because
I love that question.
It's different with everybody, but it's a little bit the same all the way across the board. And I do think that this time, as much as it stinks and as much as all of us hate it, I think it allows us all to at least sit down, whether consciously or subconsciously, and answer that question for ourselves.
Totally.
And is it something that we want to do on the other side of this? Which is why I think theater, when we come back, will just be stronger.
I agree with you totally.
Yeah. Well, Matt, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm glad that I got to get you on and got to get your opinions and thoughts and to hear a little bit about your past.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad we got to do this.
Absolutely. And thank you to everybody who's listening. You can always find us on Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and YouTube. So until next time.
Bye.